AI is not going to replace recruiters. AI is going to replace recruiters that aren't willing to use AI.
Welcome to the Tech Savvy Recruiter, the podcast for recruitment and staffing agency owners keen to explore the tech innovations reshaping our industry. I'm Andrew Roger from RecMate.
And I'm Belinda Kerr from Recruitment Garage, and together we're your hosts bringing you a stellar lineup of tech experts ready to help you understand and, more importantly, benefit from the increasing array of tech available to you today.
Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Tech Savvy Recruiter. Today, Belinda Kerr and I are talking about the future of hiring, specifically how AI and automation are redefining recruitment. Our guest this week is Josh from Quil.ai, an innovative SaaS company at the forefront of AI and solutions for talent acquisition. We'll talk more about their solution during the podcast, I'm sure. In general, they've been developing a lot of cutting-edge tools to streamline the hiring process while also keeping an eye on the human element, which I love. That's really vital to successful recruitment. So we're thrilled to have Josh here today to share his insights and experiences and predictions of what's next in this exciting world of hiring. So let's dive in. Welcome, Josh. Before we jump into some of the questions that we've got lined up for you, could you please give us a bit of a view about who you are and what Quil.ai is for those that don't know about it?
Yeah, 100%. I'll give a quick little intro, but Belinda, Andrew, super excited to be here today. Just quick introduction on my side. My name's Josh Kirkham. I'm the VP of Revenue over here at Quil. Background on me is actually nothing to do with recruiting. So I came from tech sales, went from a cold calling role, building out PLG sales teams, worked at HubSpot for a couple of years. And what we had found is that tech sales reps were actually really bad at updating HubSpot, Salesforce, things like that. And so when we started building out Quil at the start, the original idea was to help tech sales teams keep HubSpot, Salesforce, things like that updated. But it was actually about September 2023, about 6 months into building Quil, salesq.com, where we had a bunch of recruiters reach out and say, hey, any chance you update Bullhorn or Loxo? And we're like, no, but maybe we should. And so we actually decided to fully pivot the business in November 2023, easily the best decision we ever made. So what it is that Quil does is we're the number one AI platform built specifically for recruiting firms. So we don't do this for anyone else except for our friends in third-party recruiting, doing things like updating your notes after calls, filling in any fields within your ATS, and even creating the first draft of any of your write-ups. From the clients we work with today, our average firm saves 8 hours per week per recruiter by using Quil to automate their admin work.
Yeah, I mean, such a great service. And yeah, as BK says, I'm sold. I hate putting stuff into the database. We do a lot of coaching with companies about how to streamline that and how to put minimal things in, but getting the maximum leverage from what they do. And this is another prime example of how they can even enhance what the human is doing. Right. So we might get into a little bit more of the details around the product later in the call, but yeah, we love it so far. More generally, you touched on a few things in your intro there. And one thing that always sticks in my mind is how AI or artificial intelligence is reshaping what we do as talent acquisition professionals, particularly around that funnel process that we go through from sourcing candidates to making that final placement end goal there. So from your perspective and what you see generally, not only with your own product, but, you know, in the recruitment tech landscape, how is it helping or reshaping us as recruiters?
I think the most interesting way to think about AI's practical use case, especially as a recruiter today, is if you think about all the different things you can do with AI, there are some really good ideas and there's some really bad ideas that we've all heard. I think the most interesting way that teams should be and could be thinking about using AI is replacing all those manual, mundane tasks that honestly aren't revenue generating and having this awesome assistant that knows everything about you, what you do as your business, just do it all for you. And so I'm very biased, obviously, with what we do at Quil, but I think one of the most interesting use cases for AI is actually a lot of the back office work. So things like making sure your ATS is up to date, doing a lot of the data entry work on your side, just all those non-revenue generating activities that we are bogged down with, or you are all bogged down with on a day-to-day basis as recruiters, that we can now have this awesome assistant doing. Because the one thing that I always joke about with some of our clients, and I know everyone's thought about it the same, nobody gets into recruiting to update their database. But that seems to be where we spend the majority of our time as recruiters on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, or things like creating write-ups, submittals, job descriptions, whatever that might be. And so one of the biggest ways that I see AI really reshaping the way recruiting is done is finding all those manual admin tasks that we are getting bogged down with, sometimes spending up to half of our day doing, and using this new tool to do so. There's a lot of people who look at using systems like AI and they might be able to do more with less or whatever that might be. I really feel like when you're starting to utilize AI incredibly efficiently, You'll either see a 30% gain in the productivity your team has, or you can have 30% less people and get that exact same productivity. The math really just works out to what you're looking to automate and really how you are buying back and filling that time that you bought back now when you can actually do it with higher leverage tasks. And I truly think if you boil down what AI can do to its simplest form, it's just that. What are the things that we are spending our time on that are not helping us progress our business? And how can we make sure that we are putting our time back into doing so and automating the work that's not actually getting that same outcome?
I love that. And I love the comment about, I often hear people say to me, but then, because I deal with the smaller recruitment founders, how should I be growing my business? What sort of team should I be employing? And I'm like, it's up to you. Start with what you want and then build the tools and the people around it. And what I love about what you just said is, if you want to go up by 30 people, do. But if you just want to hang out and do 4 days, maybe not 4 hours, 4 hours a week and spend the rest of the time with your family, then you can titrate that to what you need. And that's what I love about the world we live in today. It doesn't have to be a typical recruitment business. I don't think there is one anymore. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, they were all pretty much looked the same. AI is obviously really reshaping that to a large degree. And I think a bit of the frustration that I hear around AI is, and I guess we've got some way to go on that, is the actual accuracy of updating that data. If there's tools that are just relying on LinkedIn, well, we know that LinkedIn's data isn't always as accurate as it needs to be. There's not increasingly so, apparently, less people are updating their data on LinkedIn. So I think that's a big question in AI that people need to feel really comfortable that when they are updating that data is going to be accurate and they don't have to then go in and check it to make sure, then why is it all in the first place?
100% agree. And I think the really interesting 2 points that I really think of, Belinda, when you're mentioning that is we always have to take into consideration what is a source of truth that the AI is starting to work off of. If we're working off an imperfect system, it's impossible to think that we're going to get a perfect result, especially based on information, right? And so I think that's one really big thing that we also always have to take in mind, no matter what piece of technology we're looking to use, no matter if it's AI driven or not, what is the source of truth they're actually collecting their data from? Because that's going to have such a huge impact to the results we're looking to see. The second piece, though, that we really just understand, just based on how AI is operating today, it's not a perfect system. And honestly, I don't know if it'll ever be. Even today, when you look at a lot of the AI systems out there, based on how the algorithms work, the LLMs, things like that, they find that they're about 95% accurate. 95% accurate is a lot better than 10, 15, 20%, but it's never going to be perfect. And so the big thing that I've always been a really big believer in when you're using these systems, whatever the AI gives you should never be that final output that you were sending over to the hiring team. In my incredibly biased opinion, that is a first degree recipe to trying to figure out how to get AI to replace us as recruiters. And that's not what we want whatsoever, right? Like we want to make sure that we are here still facilitating that role, but using AI to help fill in the gaps. And so one of the things that I talk a lot about, not only with my sales team, but even with recruiters that we speak with, is the 10-80-10 principle. This is something I got from a great entrepreneur, Dan Martell, and I think it's very applicable to so many different systems. But thinking about whenever you're using AI to fill in a system, maybe that's the first 10% being, what is the process that I'm trying to change in my business? Or here's the structure that I want whenever I'm making a layout, a job description, whatever that is. And the goal of AI is to do 80% of the heavy lifting, putting all that context in there for you. So you're not spending for example, on a submittal, 30 minutes to an hour filling in the information from that call. That last 10% that we're going to send to the hiring team still should be our work. That should still be us reviewing it, making our final edits, making sure it's in my voice, not some random AI systems. But I really think that last 5-10% is such a missed opportunity that a lot of people don't think about. And they think, my job is to use AI to do it all. I disagree. The goal is to use AI to do 90% of the heavy lifting. We are still employed and hired to do our jobs incredibly well. We just use AI to put all that context in there for us so we can put that finishing touch on it. It's still a 90% time saving. And I think that's one really interesting piece that people don't always consider when they're using AI systems. It shouldn't replace everything, just the majority of what you do, because you're still incredibly talented at your role. It's why you're doing it today.
That's a great point. So do you think that there's a bit of an expectation with recruiters, or you're speaking to a lot of them, that AI should be more 100% than 90% than it in fact is, and perhaps there's an education piece there?
I think there's a lot of people who are trying to see how AI can play into things. They see how close and how accurate it can be. And I think there is that conception that maybe this can just do it all. My point, though, is if AI can do it all, why am I hired as a recruiter? Is the other side of it too. right? And we know that if the end goal is to use AI to make us more efficient, then we should be using AI to make us more efficient, not to do the entire job. That's my hot take, though.
Yeah, great point.
Again, my personal opinion, probably aligned with you guys, is that the human element is always going to be part of the recruitment cycle. So free us up to do more of that human stuff is my philosophy in life. I think you both touched on two interesting things in the last couple of minutes. One with a little slip of the 4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss, BK. I love that because I was thinking about this earlier before we jumped on. One of the elements in Tim Ferriss's book, 4-Hour Work Week, is applying that 80-20 principle. So work out that 20% of the work that generates 80% of your results. And I'm sure it's not filling in the database with stuff. It's doing those meet and greets, those marketing calls, client visits, interviews with the candidates, assessments of candidates, etc. So focus on those high impact activities and get rid of the rest. And historically, that was maybe an assistant, somebody who picks up some of that manual task work and does that for you. But now we're looking at technological solutions there to pick up some of that to make us more efficient, to get that, maybe 2 to 3 times more efficiency back into my calendar as opposed to me doing those manual processes there. And then the second thing, I know BK and I have had a lot of chats around Dan Martell and his philosophies in life. Love his book, Buy Back Your Time. And again, this is one of the principles in there to not do the stuff we shouldn't be doing. Pay somebody else or a system or a technology piece to do something that you're not great at and is much more efficient to do. So I think that's what we're really evolving to, to get that time back in our days to do more human stuff with it, to focus on the things that, we do, because there is an art and science in recruitment, and the science stuff we can maybe process, we can put in systems to do, but that art of recruitment, I still believe is going to be conjured by us humans.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And again, the whole goal is to give you more time so that you can do those things that we enjoy doing as recruiters, which is talking to candidates, talking to clients, finding new people, and helping them find their dream roles. Everything that we can do outside of that, let's keep finding ways to automate. And I really think that's such a powerful way that AI can be operated, so that in theory, you could spend your day just back to back, maybe that's 6-8 hours a day, just talking to people, because all the rest of the stuff you're going to be doing is automated away from you. Like, how cool would that world be if you didn't have to do the initial business development outreach, you didn't have to build your candidate sourcing lists, you had it compile all that together, you double check it to make sure it's all accurate before it's sent, and then you could spend your time doing those high leverage tasks like you were talking about, Andrew. And I think that's obviously the utopia dream state that AI might be able to help take us to, especially when we're looking about those efficiency in our businesses. But I do feel like it is still quite a few years away from that before we get to that point too, which is probably a good thing, because that would be an even faster change than we've seen today in the AI.
Yeah, a little time yet to happen.
Big tick on efficiency there. Josh, just to change tack a little bit, we did briefly mention it, but let's just talk about bias for a second. I'd love to know what you're hearing in the market around concerns, from the recruiters that you're speaking with around recruiter tools and AI-driven bias, and, how can we mitigate these risks?
So when you're thinking about like the risk around AI-driven bias, is that more so around the risk of just using AI from like consent side of things, how it might handle our data, things like that? Or can you tell me a little bit more, Belinda, what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think where it mainly comes up is in, for example, sourcing. You've got 2 candidates and the AI is judging. Maybe it's putting a bit of a bias toward this person that it shouldn't be. It doesn't have that human filter on it. My sense is that's mainly where it comes from. I know it's a little bit left of field of what you guys are doing, but I just wondered, I'm curious because it does come up quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, again, what is kind of the end goal of what we were looking for an AI system to do? In my opinion, especially when you're looking at it from higher efficiency goals, where it's about making lists for you, compiling information, things like that. Again, it's always only going to be as accurate around the prompt that we give or how we're actually asking it to do something. And so I think the really interesting evolution that we're going to continue to see, especially for systems like sourcing, is that we'll either see that AI becomes so good at finding things based on very simple prompts that it might be able to find bigger lists for us, or we get really good at understanding how to prompt something incredibly well to get the outputs we're looking for. Because to your point, Belinda, there's such a risk with using AI to make judgment calls of, do I take Andrew or Belinda? That really should be the human's point of where they really look to step in. But if we're looking to say, hey, I'm looking to fill this CFO role over in Sydney, Australia, get me a list of the best 20 candidates that you can find with this type of experience, blah, blah, blah. And then the AI system found you that list of 20, which would honestly probably take a couple of hours if we're looking to do that just through LinkedIn Recruiter, go manual by manual, things like that. And so I really see aspects like that being a really big way that AI can be used on less of that risk mitigation side. But any time that we are looking to use AI to make a decision on if somebody is good or not because of XYZ reasons, we're just asking for unconscious bias to get led into that decision. And again, taking away the whole point of what we are looking to do on a day-to-day basis, recruiters. So it's like, what are those final decisions, judgment calls, and pieces that we want to make sure that we're still controlling? And what are the things that we honestly should be okay letting an AI system help operate for us? And I think that's going to be something that we as recruiters, or you as recruiters, really just need to get an understanding of what is it that we're looking for out of a system. Because like what we know, just being in the capitalist society we live in, wherever we put our dollars tends to be what tools, systems, and processes get built. And our dollars are the things that really help make those decisions. So the big thing that I always urge a lot of people to think about, especially when you're using AI, what is that vision that you see it actually being able to incorporate into your business? Because those systems, those processes, those things that you invest into are going to dictate the future of what this industry is going to look like. Where we don't spend our money, those projects that we don't support, it's going to go in that opposite direction too. And so that's my high-level workaround answer to the question you asked there, Belinda. I think it's a very relevant point, but I really think we just have to get really clear of what it is that we want to automate, and then put our resources into supporting projects that actually automate those tasks for us, and then be really clear on what are the decisions that we really feel like we need to be making, and make sure we're not investing in technologies that try to make those decisions for us.
And I think the flip side of that as well is, if you think about bias, well, we all have our own, as you said, we all have our own unconscious bias as well. So, maybe AI can work on the flip side of that. They're pulling out people that maybe you might not have because of your own unconscious bias to start with. So yeah, interesting. Thanks,
I think
Josh.
there's a lot of pros and cons there. I know there's been lots of studies around that particular point, BK. You do some blind assessments of resumes, for example, taking out some of the markers that might put a few of those bias things into play. You can get some very different answers in terms of who you'd shortlist, unfortunately, from a human perspective. But yeah, to your point, I think some of it can be mitigated by using some of the tech pieces there to, get to a long list that the human then reviews to make that shortlist. I'd love to have some people take away a few strategic things, Josh. So maybe let's talk around some specific examples around how we're talking about automation. So maybe around how automation can help recruiters spend more time on strategic tasks. So what would you be your top 2 or 3 tips for recruiters not to be doing, and to have an automation set up or some sort of AI tool set there to help them rather than doing those admin tasks manually?
And again, my side of the realm is going to be very biased to the problems that I look to solve with our tools around the AI systems. I think the biggest thing that I would say is the biggest area of opportunity for automation. This is even something that we look at just for our sales team and our marketing teams and things like that. Data entry and updating. Data enrichment is probably the simplest and most overlooked task that people can do to automate their process, buy back their time, and see exponential results of what they're looking for. And it's something that a lot of teams kind of do, or they don't really pay attention to, and it always bites them in the butt in the end. And I know a really, really interesting example of this. Inside of Bullhorn's State of Recruiting 2024 report, one of the things that they found is that today, 70% of placements that are made come from candidates that are sourced external to our firm's database. But of those, 66% of those externally sourced and placed candidates already lived in our database but had to get sourced again.
Crazy,
42% of our placements, we are duplicating our time, cost structures, and efforts trying to find. And data enrichment is probably one of the simplest things that people can do that's going to not only save them a ton of time, but it's going to save them a ton of money in that duplicated cost. So data enrichment and data accuracy is probably one of the biggest things that I would say for that. The other area that I would say is probably the biggest area of opportunity is list building. I know, the thing that I just find so fascinating about the third-party recruiting space, especially coming from sales, as a tech sales rep, I started as an outbound sales rep. So I had a little bit of a taste of what it could be like, but third-party recruiters are outbound to find clients, and then they're outbound to find candidates. It's a fully outbound role. And so our ability to build great, consistent, easy to read through lists is going to be what's going to make or break, especially our prospecting time. And that is the lifeblood of our business as recruiters. And so I would say the other area where AI and automation can be used so effectively to save you time is building lists. And I know there's a lot of very interesting tools out there that are really used from like a sales tech pipeline side of things, which might be really applicable to a lot of recruiting teams, but systems like Clay that can actually help build you lists that you could put information into to customize those lists and use that to build prospecting reports for outbound email campaigns, social campaigns, or even just cold calling. Those are 2 of the biggest overlooked opportunities in my eyes of where automation can really get brought into play. That'll help save you a ton of time and help drastically accelerate your business.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And one thing we always coach on is getting the data set right before you do anything. Having a construction site without a solid foundation just doesn't work, does it? So your recruitment solid foundation is your database systems processes there. And then you can build your business on top. And to BK's earlier point, it might be a team of 5, 10, 15, and you've got a really great team humming there. It could be above and beyond that, depending on your recruitment goals there. So a lot in that in terms of just getting the basics right and, helping yourself be better by, putting some good process and systems, do some of that stuff for you, because we're not perfect humans and we can't do everything that the machine can do seamlessly, and some things much better than the human can. So as data comes into the system, if you can have, techniques and technology to parse that really efficiently as you're having conversations like we might be, extracting some cool stuff from that conversation and pushing it into the right field, into Bullhorn where relevant, makes so much more sense. But yeah, love that. And yeah, a lot of noise at the moment around Quil.ai and how that's helping a lot of recruitment companies. And yeah, if you're not looking at that, you should be, to see how that's going to add value there.
I was playing around on Quil last night, and I'd only sort of had a bit of an introduction to it before, and I just went down so many rabbit holes. And they have all these, they don't call them recipes, but basically let's call it a playbook of what you can do to find out certain things. And I was blown away by the level of insight they can get around data. It's just, and then to be able to then turn that into predicting behavior of people to what comes next. I mean, how powerful is that? We're getting into that, not The Matrix, that movie that Tom Cruise was in years ago where he got charged for the murder that he was going to do in the future.
Report.
Minority Report, yeah.
Was that the one? Yeah. And I was thinking, I was like, my God, it's quite something. So actually, I think that's a really nice segue into the next question, which is really around the human connection, especially with candidates, but obviously clients as well. And my thoughts are that if we're clever about this, it should enhance it. And that's what we should always be doing, is to looking to enhance, not replace that human connection. But love to hear your thoughts on, Josh, around how AI can really help us maintain that human connection.
I think one of the biggest opportunities for using AI to have and maintain that human connection, if you think about how we spend our days back to back on calls, talking to the 10,000 candidates a week that we look to talk to, the easiest way to keep a human connection is if I remember Andrew's kid's name, what he did on vacation, what he has coming up the next month, and any of those little intangible goals that we might have. One of the coolest and probably simplest ways that AI can be used to help for that is, imagine right before you get on that call with Andrew, you get a summary of every conversation you've ever had with Andrew, some of the key points you want to talk about, and a couple key reminders of what you should be discussing on that next call. And just having that easily put right in front of you. And there's so many tools and systems that are out there today that can even just help organize that information. I even know some teams just put it all into a custom GBT that's their own closed-end system with all the notes they want and say, what is a quick recap of my last 3 conversations with Andrew? And then as you jump on, have it all easily in front of you so you're not having to try to piece some of that together at the start. And I think that's one super small example of it. But again, the goal of AI is to help us be more human, spend less of that mental energy doing all those other mundane tasks so we can stay as present as possible. And I think that's just one quick little example of how it can be used to make sure that we're keeping that incredibly relevant human connection in our conversations.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's being creative with it, isn't it? Like you hear something and think, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. That's, a clever idea. Being creative around what ways you can use it to save your time.
Yeah, call prep is probably one of the coolest ones, especially when we're dealing with like executive search or like those high level fit roles where it's like, how do we make these conversations meaningful, relevant? Because we know it's not if, but when they're going to want to have a conversation with us to make sure that we're helping to place them. So how do we make that lasting connection, make that great impact? I think, again, using AI for like call prep, recapping some of the notes, whatever that might be, is probably one of the easiest ways that we can not only stay present on calls, biased because of Quil and the note taking, but we can also make sure that we're coming to all of our calls incredibly prepared to make sure we're making the best use of their time, and bringing in those notable memories from previous conversations just helps them make sure that they know that we're obviously paying attention to our conversations together.
I love you raised being present, Josh. I think that's an incredible skill to build. Very difficult in our very distracted modern world where things go ping, something flashes up, you get all these virtual nudges to do something else apart from doing this eyeball to eyeball conversation and 100% focus. I remember when I was working in-house for many years and I had a CEO, every time he spoke with you, his time was 100% your time. which is an incredible feeling to have. I haven't taken manual notes for probably 24 months at least, so then I can have those connection times and I'm not madly scribbling and then trying to decipher my scribbles or types after that session. And I think we get so little time of connection with people. If we can put that connection time in and being present with conversations with candidates or clients, they're going to remember that feeling that they get, that, that Josh was 100% present at my call. Josh wasn't scanning his phone, or Josh wasn't looking the other way at another screen, etc., because he's just with me with this conversation. So I think it's a really powerful way to circumnavigate some distractions by not putting a piece of tech in there to help you.
No, 100%. And I think if we really think about what helps us win deals, what helps us win relationships and conversations, is all those little things, right? The simple things scale that we do in our business. When we overcomplicate things, that's when it fails. And one of the simplest things that we can do, to your point, Andrew, give somebody your full attention, give them your virtual eye contact, make sure you're looking at your camera on your screen, whatever that might be. But it's make sure that we're in those points that they feel like, hey, you have my full attention on this call. While I'm giving that level of respect. Those are unfortunately little intangibles that go a really long way in today's day and age, because it's not always there in our conversations. I remember even when I was at HubSpot, helping out, hiring out our team, the amount of times that I spent in Greenhouse just typing as physically fast as I could, trying to keep up with the conversation in the interview that I was doing on my side. It's not an easy job to do, making sure we're keeping all that relevant information. It's even harder when you only get paid as a contingent recruiter for actually placing that candidate, making sure you keep all that on your side too. And so any little thing that we can do to help keep us present, minimize those distractions, and make sure that we're not trying to cram in all of our submittals at the end of the week because we know they're 3 days overdue and we still haven't been able to spend the 2 hours putting it all together, are really going to help not only decrease our stress, but it's going to make sure that we're creating that fantastic client and candidate experience at the end of the day.
Just in that discussion, I was just thinking around, the world is changing so rapidly for us recruiters. Are there some skills or competencies that you see that recruiters should be thinking about to develop to remain relevant in this, I guess, modern technological landslide that's happening?
I think that the biggest thing that I would challenge everyone that's watching this to do, if you're not doing it already, make an excuse, find a way to try to use AI every single day for something, just for something. I think one of the simplest things that I heard from a couple VC companies in the tech world is that they said every single person on their team needs to have something like ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever that is, open on their second monitor every single day. Because what it created from a habit is, instead of, for example, Googling something, ask the AI to start using it. Because when you start using it, you rip that Band-Aid off, you will find other excuses to try to use it for and say, hey, I wonder if it could do something around this. And I think the coolest thing with AI is anything that you want it to do and you ask it to do, it'll literally do. And the only way that it gets better is if we get better at communicating with it. AI is its own language, its own style, its own communication path. And the more comfortable we get just by forcing ourselves to do it, the more efficient that we are going to become as humans as the world continues to evolve and adapt into this AI-driven society. It's not going to slow down. And the big thing that I really hear a lot of teams speak about, AI is not going to replace recruiters. AI is going to replace recruiters that aren't willing to use AI. It's the same thing we saw with the internet revolution. It's the same thing we saw with any new stage that we see inside of business. So my biggest challenge, find excuses, find ways to try using it. If it doesn't work, what is that? 5 minutes that you wasted trying something new? That's called an experiment. And we know that you have to do things 1,000 times wrong sometimes before you do it that one time right. But when you do it that one time right, that's where you find exponential growth in what you're looking to do.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And I think the way to learn things is to get in and get your hands dirty, isn't it? And fall over a little bit. And it's a really interesting point because especially in the last, I'm just talking weeks here. I've been speaking to a lot of founders that, again, small businesses, and they're so overwhelmed with AI. They just don't know that there's got the whole FOMO thing going on. They're just not they've tried some things, they don't work. And they also feel like there's so much, what do I need? And I feel like I've got to buy this bit of stuff to do this and this to do this, and they're unsure how to get it all together. And I think what you've just said there, it's just play a little bit, get used to it. Where we're going to be sitting 12 months' time is going to be very different again. But if they're not at least on the court having a go now, they're going to be really left behind in a year's time. But I do know that there is that frustration, and it does feel like it's kind of, even with clay, you've got to then buy this, buy that, get all these other things in place that have all got to work together. And if I'm a small recruitment founder, do I really have time to go and do that? Are there going to be consultants that will help me do it? I mean, obviously, Andrew's working a lot around automation and helping people too. I think there is a real fear around how do I get this right, and when's everything going to play together, and how's my tech stack going to be seamless and everything's going to play nicely together? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think it really comes down to paralysis by analysis so many of the times. And everyone trying to think of this one magic silver bullet that's going to come in and solve our business because I installed this plugin. What we know about business, what we know about life, it never goes that way, right? That's not what we're looking to do, right? It's obviously ideal, but the easiest way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And that's not going to change no matter what. And our business is not going to get that overly simplified because of this new fancy system like AI coming in. And I think the hardest part is because every business is so unique, every challenge that business has is so unique. Again, there's not going to be one silver bullet. The biggest thing that I would recommend, especially as you're looking at AI systems in general, it's just like any other implementation you're going to put in your business. What is that one big bottleneck that I have across my business? And what are 1,000 different ways that I can try to solve it? And then just start narrowing that list down. And we know that big list of 1,000 that feels incredibly overwhelming, when you start looking at it, you're like, okay, these first 900, they suck. Like, that's not going to make sense because of X, Y, and Z. Well, we just decrease your list by 90%. Now we can actually start to go through with some thought and think, what are 1 or 2 experiments that I feel comfortable doing today that don't have to be $10,000 a month that I can at least try this with, right? We can start with a small sample size, see what things look like, and then we can grow from there. And I think that the biggest thing that I would say is find one and just commit to it. And there's such simple things that you can do, even if you don't want to spend the time or resources to go find a consultant right away. There's this magical thing called YouTube that you can find anything that you want about any topic, and you can get some pretty good information to start with just by spending some time on YouTube. And it's fantastic. What is the easiest way that I can use AI for X? And I guarantee there's content around it. And then once you start educating yourself, you have a better understanding of that problem. As you mentioned, there's fantastic resources like Andrew that you can actually have conversations with, bounce some ideas around. But again, the big thing that we just have to start doing, you got to lean in. You got to lean into the change. You have to find some of those ways to take that one step forward, because just like I talk about with every sales team I've ever built, the goal is to fail as fast as possible, because that's where you're going to start learning. And the faster that we can get over that fear of failure, the faster that we are going to grow as business leaders, as humans, as anything that you're looking to do. But it always starts with failing. And we have to be very comfortable just getting over that initial inertia, because that's when we're actually going to start making change in our day-to-day and even our businesses.
Sage advice there, Josh. Sage advice.
Well, I mean, with the sport analogy, Josh, you don't think a basketball player just hovers and thinks, am I going to get this shot? And then goes, I'm not sure, I'm not going to take the shot. LeBron James, who I think is still the record holder for number of points scored in NBA, I think he scored over 42,000 points in his career. How many times did he miss?
60% of the time. Probably 40 to 45% accuracy, which is insane, top 1% world class. Yeah.
So if you're not taking the shots, you're not going to get the points. So it is tough though. I mean, I suffer a little bit of procrastination, paralysis via analysis sometimes. And you've got to go, just get over yourself, just do it. What's the worst going to happen? It doesn't work. Just try again.
Is too that you're not sitting there as the one person that doesn't know this stuff. We're all in the same boat. We're all trying to work toward and understand it and, work out what, and there's some great groups and there's great information. And like Josh was saying, there's lots on YouTube. There are places we can go to find information. There's people that can support us on that journey. Tech's going to come and go. Some of it's going to be great. Some of it's not. We're going to make some mistakes on the way. But that's just all part of business. There's nothing new there. So I think it's not walking this journey on your own in silo, for sure. There's so many ways to get more information. But it's such a good point about analysis paralysis. Like if you want to walk across the country, you've got to take the first step. You're not going to get anywhere before that. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Finally, I'd love to hear a little bit more about Quil. So this is your 2-minute pitch type scenario here, Josh. For those that want to hear more about it, what do you guys do, and how can they then get in contact with you?
Yeah, I know I chatted about it a bit at the start. And I'll keep it super brief, not to ruin any conversations that are going. But Quil is the number one AI platform built specifically for recruiting firms. So again, we don't do it for anyone else except for our friends in third-party recruiting. And we'll do things like automatically join your video calls, phone calls, even in-person meetings. We even have things like a fancy mobile app that even if you're on your phone and you just want to make sure you can add Quil to it, we can easily see any of your upcoming calls. You can call directly from Quil, or If you have an ATS that we integrate with, you can even search for those candidates like from a Loxo side of things. Pull their phone numbers into your Quil queue just to easily make phone calls. We make sure that all your notes are updated after the call. The appropriate activity types are updated on that, especially for tracking reporting purposes. Any relevant fields are updated. And the biggest time saver is we'll help create the first draft of your write-ups. And we do this very uniquely, where we'll actually grab examples of what you feel good looks like across your submittals, job descriptions, new client intake forms, whatever that might be. Upload those as an example into Quil so we can match your writing style, tonality, even the formatting you're looking to use today. But as mentioned, our clients on average are saving 8 hours per recruiter per week by using Quil to automate their admin work. And all they had to do was hang up the phone or end that video call.
That's great. And Josh, with the ones that you're not integrated with at the moment, is it difficult via Zapier or other, like, can they still do it relatively
we're happy
easily?
To build the integrations, though. The one thing that we understand is, though, the land of third-party recruiting has 10 million ATSs out there. There is one ATS for every 3 recruiters in the market. And we get that. And just because, again, this is the only niche that we're looking to service, we're even adding about 2 to 3 new integrations a month. The big thing that we say is introduce us to your point of contact at the ATS. We'll have a conversation with them just to make sure their API endpoints could even support it. And if not, if they're willing to work with us to help make sure we can. And then we're happy to add it to our list of integrations to build. So if there's an integration that for whatever reason we don't have yet, let our team know, introduce us to your point of contacts there. We are happy to explore those integration options.
Great.
Amazing.
And if anyone's interested, and come on Quil's website, you can either book a demo with our sales team or you can even try Quil for free today. Just on Quil's website, click the link. We have 16 hours of sales coverage a day, all the way from our early UK clients right till about midday in Australia there too.
You're a very busy man covering all that time zone yourself, Josh. So we appreciate taking time out of your very busy day to spend some with us to chat around all things AI, automation, and the amazing world of tech for the recruitment industry. So thanks once again for joining us today, Josh.
My pleasure. It's fantastic getting to speak to you today.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Tech Savvy Recruiter. If you'd like to stay up to date with the latest recruitment trends and insights, make sure that you remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And also, if you'd like to speak to Andrew about turning your tech stack into your secret weapon, or myself around creating an agency that delivers you more money, more meaning, and more freedom, we'd absolutely love to chat. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support. We look forward to seeing you next time.